Hey folks, this is Kelani. Ever since we found out that set bonuses weren't going to be a thing in Battle for Azeroth, I feel like the dev team has tried time and time again to appease us for that loss. Azerite armor and traits will fill in the gaps, don't you worry. Obviously that didn't work, but then they started adding in some different effects onto several pieces of raid gear from the Battle of Desert Allure. Jaina's offhand comes to mind, where equipping it will reduce the effects of her blizzard during the intermission. Well, it looks like they decided to keep that same idea, except go one fairly large step further. The next raid that should open up sometime after patch 815 hits live servers is the Crucible of Storms. This one is a little special in that it's going to serve as a stepping stone raid to the next large piece of story content, so it's going to be in the same tier as the Battle of Desert Allure, and it's only going to have 2 bosses. Those bosses will drop some very interesting items. In fact, every single item dropped from the Crucible of Storms has some form of special effect. That goes for every piece of armor and the 2 available weapons. There's also going to be some trinkets from the next raid, which are always super special anyways. Alright Kelani, enough already, show us the new loot! I'll go through this one armor type at a time. It's worth noting that between the 2 bosses' loot tables there's 3 pieces of loot for each armor type, which are all boots, legs, belts, or gloves. So no new Azerite pieces from the next raid. Then we also have 2 weapons, 1 staff and 1 polearm, as well as 4 trinkets, 1 for healers, 1 for tanks, 1 for intellect DPS, and then 1 for agility or strength DPS. So a fairly good mix there, and as I said, pretty much every single item here has some form of special effect. Let's take a closer look at the cloth items first, starting with the cloth boots. I'm not even going to try pronouncing half of this stuff, just to give you a heads up. These are Crit Mastery boots, which will increase your speed by 200 for every 20% health you are missing, up to a max of 600 speed. Whenever you trigger the effect on these boots, you gain a little effect around your feet, which changes depending on how many stacks you have. It's actually really cool. 600 speed also gets you moving fairly quickly, so it's not an entirely useless little bonus there. Hopping along to the cloth legs, these have only crit on them and are actually missing the other secondary stat, probably due to the bonus effect. The legs allow you to open up a fissure at your current location, which lasts for 15 seconds. While you stand in that fissure, you gain over 1000 haste, but if you ever have to leave, you'll take about 30k damage, so these are going to be great for when you can just stand still and go crazy, but you'll pay the price if you ever have to move from your current location. The last cloth item is a pair of gloves which have haste and versatility. When you equip them, every 1000 mana you spend will give you a teeny absorption effect that can stack up to about 14k. So you pretty much just get a mini shield for being a caster, because every cloth wearer spends mana no matter what spells you're casting, just some might spend more than others. Arcane mages might end up getting the most use out of this particular item alongside the priest healers. Just as a quick note, all of these pieces of gear currently share the same models as the Battle of Desert Allure sets, just in case you were wondering, so there's nothing new to look forward to on that front. That might change by the time the raid actually opens up though. Remember, we are still on PTR, so anything could change between now and when it goes live, but for now there's no new armor models. Let's move on to the leather gear. We have a leather belt with haste and versatility, with an on-use effect that tethers you to up to 5 allies around you. After 6 seconds you heal for 15% of the health restored to tethered allies. Honestly, this one is a bit hard to test properly, but it does have a little animation tied to it. It's very short, so I'll slow it down. I wonder how this item would be best used. It sounds like you gain extra healing for any health your tethered ally gets in that 6-second duration. That could be useful in large AoE damage scenarios, I guess, but time will tell. We also have some leather legs with just mastery, and then when you equip them, your abilities have a chance to summon a storm for 10 seconds that heals you for a little bit every 2 seconds. If you're at max health, the storm will deal damage to a nearby enemy instead. So you get something useful out of this no matter what, right? If you're not at max health, you get a little bit of healing to help you get there, but if you are at max health, then it's just free damage. That's pretty cool. And then the last leather item is a pair of gloves with just crit, but while you're above 90% health, your attacks have a chance to deal additional damage to your target, but also to yourself. You're going to have to make sure you're in your healer's good books for items like this. As soon as you drop below 90% health, you lose the bonus, so be nice to your healers, and they might just make sure you're healthy enough to take advantage of this kind of effect. Onto the mail gear, we have a mail belt with haste and mastery with a rather specific effect. Killing an aberration inspires 5 nearby allies, granting them a little bit of crit for 30 seconds. Hopefully there's some aberrations in the new raid, otherwise this will end up being totally worthless. We also have some mail legs with just haste, but a pretty cool effect. Whenever you're above 90% health, your attacks have a chance to send a crashing wave down on your target, dealing frost damage. But if you aren't above 90% health, your attacks have a chance to heal you instead. Your healers are going to love you for equipping this one, no doubt. It reminds me a little bit of the Root Legendary from Legion all over again, except people might actually end up using this item if the wave does enough damage to offset the loss of the other secondary stat. The animation is a little pathetic on this one though, just a little splash of water, so that might not be finished yet. The last mail item is a pair of gloves with just crit, but your attacks have a chance to grant you a shield which absorbs about 13k damage, and while that shield persists, you gain just under 200 haste. So you sort of get the secondary stat, except you only benefit from it if you don't take any damage, and you have the shield active. That's an interesting trade-off, though not quite as cool as some of the other ones we've seen so far. Now for the plate gear, we have some plate boots with just versatility, but your auto attacks have a chance to grant you untouchable for 15 seconds, which can stack up to 15 times. This grants crit for every stack, but if you ever take damage, you lose all stacks of untouchable, because then you wouldn't be untouchable. That should give you just a little bit of motivation to dodge pretty much every single mechanic you can, just to try and push that crit buff as far as possible for that number one pass. I can already see people raging about losing their stacks. We also have some plate legs with just haste, and if your target has a lower health percentage than you, your damaging spells and abilities have a chance to deal extra shadow damage, but you will take a little bit of damage as well. So once again, throw a few gold into your favourite healer's pockets to make sure they keep you topped off at all times, to make sure you get the most out of these life-tapping effects. This one should be a lot easier to keep track of though, and you can even proc it. If you're not above 90% health, you should benefit from it for the majority of any given encounter, providing you're not standing in every patch of fire available to you. And to wrap up the armor type gear, we have a plate belt with haste and mastery. Whenever you fall below 25% health, you instantly heal for about 40k health, but then take the same damage over the next 10 seconds. So in this clip, the bubble is completely unrelated to the effect, we'll see that later. But for the mindbender on your face, that's the visual given to you taking damage over time. So somewhere hidden in this belt is a creepy octopus squid thing which will latch itself onto your face whenever you drop too low. That's actually maybe quite useful for tanks, and it doesn't take up a trinket slot, which is a nice little addition, and that's usually where these kind of effects are. Let's have a look at the weapons next. There's only 2 of them, which might be a bit disappointing to some of you, especially when you consider one is a healing staff and the other is a polearm. Let's check out the staff first. The staff doesn't have any secondary stats at all, but it does have an effect which allows you to give an Oceanic Ward to a friendly player that lasts for 1 minute. If that player ever takes a large enough hit, they'll instantly get healed for 45k health. This has a 40-second cooldown, so that's going to be up on your tanks fairly often, I would say. Because it doesn't have secondary stats and the effect is strictly bonus healing, I doubt any DPS casters would want to pick this particular item up. The other weapon is a polearm, and while it does have stamina, it doesn't actually have agility or strength, but that means that anybody who can use polearms can use it. It also doesn't have any secondary stats, which makes me think this item just won't be picked up at all, but the effect might just be strong enough for it not to matter. Taking damage has a chance to give you a bubble which absorbs 25% of incoming damage, up to 40k, and when the bubble bursts, you gain your primary stat for 30 seconds, which can stack up to 3 times. So there's your primary stat, but no secondary stats still. It's also not guaranteed, but extra damage mitigation from any source is still going to be valuable, I guess, for tanks, so tanks are probably going to be the only ones wanting to pick up this polearm. It is all going to depend on how that weighs up against other weapons though. And then we have the trinkets, which might be the most boring items on the list, not because the effects are boring by any means, but because we kind of expect trinkets to be the coolest items from any given raid. All of these other items basically had an extra trinket tacked onto them. But anyways, let's have a look at the Void Stone first. This is a healing trinket by the looks of things. You can enshroud an ally in darkness for 12 seconds, absorbing the next 90,000 damage or healing. So if you pop this on someone, you don't want to heal them until that bubble disappears, right? Because it will absorb damage or healing. So the more you heal, the less damage it absorbs. This could actually really have some really cool niche uses, but I wonder if it's going to outperform some of the other trinkets in play. Then we also have the Harbinger's Inscrutable Will. This one is an intellect DPS trinket which gives your abilities a chance to fire an Oblivion Spear towards your target. When the spear impacts, it will fire 3 little projectiles back at you, which will deal damage to you if you get hit. These seem pretty fast too, and they don't appear to have a set pattern, so good luck avoiding them. I wonder if they friendly fire too, because that would be hilarious. You can play your own little minigame again if you pick up this particular trinket. The next one is supposed to be a tank trinket, I think. The Idol of Indiscriminate Consumption allows you to feed on up to 5 nearby allies or enemies, stealing up to 10,000 health from each and healing yourself for 300% of the amount stolen. So if you have plenty of enemies around you, good stuff. Deal some damage, heal some health. If you only have the boss, well, I guess a few of the melee can suffer to lose a little bit of health, right? It would be hilarious if you stole from players who need to be above 90% for their special effects to work properly, but I wonder if this trinket will do enough to secure a spot in the tank's gear set. And the last trinket we have is the very last item, I'm afraid. The Lurkers' Insidious gift allows you to embrace the gift of N'Zoth, increasing your mastery by about 1000 for 30 seconds. That's a very long buff indeed, but this buff will deal increasing damage over time as long as you maintain the buff. So I hope you pay your healers incredibly well, otherwise you're just going to fall over after 15 seconds or so. You can reactivate the trinket to disable the effect, so this one lets you play chicken with your own life. If your healers are good, and, there isn't much else going on, you should be fine. But if they decide to forget about you, well, let's just say you were taking a lot of damage in the last few seconds of this buff, so be very careful. I love that some of these items have some form of risk-reward. It really flows with the whole Void theme, or at the very least they have effects that work in unison, which is kind of the opposite, I guess. You deal damage, but you lose a bit of health. But if you aren't at the threshold to benefit, you can also heal yourself up. You have a chance to heal yourself up with some others, but if you're already at max health, then you get to deal a bit of extra damage. There's some really cool effects in there, and I'm really happy that pretty much every single item has something attached to it. Even though there's only going to be 2 bosses in this raid, some of these items are going to be highly sought after. It's kind of like getting an extra 3 trinkets for free because you have 3 pieces of gear for your armor type, which is definitely better than what we got in the Battle of Dazar Lore. I don't think it quite matches what we lost when it comes to set bonuses for raid tier gear, but at least it's something that makes you think, that's actually pretty cool. I want that item. I'm looking forward to seeing how each piece does when compared to various other pieces of gear, because obviously if the numbers aren't tuned properly, some of this just isn't going to be worth considering. I hope it is. I hope everything is tuned well enough to make them at least worth thinking, this might be a good pickup, because some of them do have that element of chance involved, and then some of them also rely on you being healed up. Which, that's going to depend on your healers. But as I said, throw them a few gold. They might just keep an eye on your health bar more than anyone else. Be a good little transaction there. But either way, that's all of the loot you can expect to come from the Crucible of Storms raid. Special effects and all. What do you think from what you've seen so far? Will this kind of item ever be able to replace set bonuses if given enough time and iteration? Or do you think the dev team should just absolutely re-implement them next expansion and just say, this was a bad idea, here's your set bonuses back? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.